They told me to call a lawyer before I called an ambulance. My own daughter had a corner office and a Tesla in the garage, and when I told her I couldn't breathe right, she asked me if I still had that old life insurance policy. That's the kind of sentence that doesn't leave you. It sits somewhere behind your ribs and just stays there. I didn't answer her. I just held the phone a little longer than I needed to, and then I hung up, 64 years old, standing in my own kitchen. But before I tell you the rest of it, I need you to understand something. This isn't a story about money. Not really. It's a story about who actually shows up when you can't do anything for them anymore. Let me back up. My name's Walter, and I've lived in the same house on Birchfield Lane outside Dayton, Ohio for almost 30 years. Nothing fancy. Vinyl siding that's gone a little gray, a driveway with a crack running clean down the middle that I keep saying I'll fix. It was a Thursday night in early spring, cold enough that the furnace still kicked on after dark, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my checkbook open, trying to make the math on my pension work for one more month. My phone rang. My wife Donna's face changed the second she saw the name on the screen. Whole different woman. That's the only smile I get to see in this house anymore, I thought. And it isn't even pointed at me. Priscilla, honey, Donna said, and her voice went up an octave. Tell me everything. I set my coffee down. Is that Pris? Let me say hello. Donna didn't even turn around. She just carried the phone into the other room like I was something in the way. Senior partner. I heard her say it through the wall like it was scripture. Well, of course you made partner. Baby, you get that drive from my side of the family. Your grandmother could sell snow to an Eskimo, rest her soul. I sat there at that table and listened to my wife of 33 years talk to our daughter like she'd just cured something instead of billed 400 extra hours. I'm not saying that to be bitter. I'm saying it because you need to know what normal looked like in my house before I tell you what happened next. Donna came back into the kitchen still glowing, and then it dropped off her face the second she looked at me, like she'd taken off a mask at the door. She's doing wonderful, Walt. That's good, I said, and I meant it. Whatever had grown up between me and that girl over the years, I never once wished her anything but well. Donna didn't say another word. She just slid the gas bill across the table toward me. Didn't ask why I'd been sitting funny in my chair all evening, one hand pressed flat against my sternum like I was holding something in. Welcome to the channel, family. Settle in, because this one's going to take you somewhere you don't expect. Hit that like button and drop where you're watching from down in the comments. You're going to want to stick around for this. Now here's where I'm supposed to make myself sound better than I was. I won't do that. 15 years ago, I wasn't some fool who blew the family's savings at a blackjack table. I ran a small heating and cooling business, 3 trucks, 6 guys on payroll, nothing enormous, but it was mine and it was good. Then a commercial client stiffed me on a $110,000 job, filed bankruptcy before I ever saw a dime, and I'd already paid my crew and my suppliers out of pocket expecting that check. The bank called my business line of credit inside of 60 days. My bonding company dropped me, and Donna never once asked if I was okay. She asked how I was going to fix it. That was 15 years ago. I've worked the parts counter at a Napa Auto Parts on Route 4 ever since, 5 days a week, coming home smelling like brake cleaner and cardboard. And somewhere in there, my daughter Priscilla decided her whole young life had been ruined because her daddy couldn't pay for the semester abroad program her sorority sisters were all doing. She's never let that one go. Not even after I explained what happened with the bankruptcy. In her mind, I failed and she paid the price for it, and maybe she needed somebody to blame, and I happened to be standing right there in the wreckage. My son is different. Marcus is 31, drives a delivery route for a regional grocery distributor, lives about 25 minutes from us, in a rented duplex over in Kettering. He was 16 when the business went under, old enough to remember what we used to have, young enough that he watched me rebuild something small out of the ashes, instead of just grieving the big thing we lost. He came by 2 nights after that phone call with Priscilla, carrying a crock pot of chili, the way his grandmother used to make it, heavy on the cumin. He didn't say one word about bills or Priscilla's promotion. He just set it down on the counter, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "You're still sitting funny, Dad. What's going on with that?" "Just my back," I told him. "Uh-huh," he said. He didn't believe me. Never did. "You're calling Dr. Alvarez tomorrow." Don't argue with me on this one. I didn't argue. There wasn't much point arguing with Marcus. He got that stubbornness from somewhere, and I had a real strong suspicion it was me. Doctor. Alvarez wasn't smiling when he came back into that exam room. Walter, I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you. He set the folder down like it weighed 40 pounds. There's a blockage, a bad one, in your left anterior descending artery. We can fix it, but it needs to be soon, not months, weeks. There it is, I thought, the other shoe finally coming down. Okay, I said, because what else do you say? So we scheduled it. And that's when a woman from billing came in, name of Sandra, looking about as comfortable as a person can look, and told me my insurance had a coverage gap on the specific stent procedure Dr. Alvarez wanted to use. Out of pocket before they'd even put me on the calendar, $2,800. I can set you up with a payment plan, Sandra said, but the cardiac team needs the deposit before they'll book the lab. Hospital policy, $2,800. You want to know something? I used to clear more than that some weeks back before the client stiffed me. Now, I sat out in my truck in that parking lot, an 11 Ranger with 190,000 miles on it, and I ran the numbers about 5 different ways, and every single time it came out the same. I didn't have it. My credit was still wrecked from the business debt. Not one bank in Montgomery County was going to look twice at me. $2,800, I thought. And I've got a daughter who just made partner at a law firm downtown. I told myself I wouldn't call her. Told myself that for 2 whole days. Then I called her anyway, because that's what a father does. You swallow it down, and you make the call, and you hope to God she's still in there somewhere underneath all that ambition. She picked up on the 5th ring, and I could hear it right away. Glasses clinking, somebody laughing, a man's voice saying something about a bottle of Macallan. Dad. Hey, can this wait? We're closing out the Kessler deposition tonight. We're celebrating. Priscilla, I need to talk to you about something. It's serious. Okay, hold on. Muffled sound like she'd put her hand over the receiver. Then, all right, go ahead. I told her all of it. The blockage, the surgery, the coverage gap, the $2,800 I needed by Monday, or they wouldn't schedule me. There was a pause. A long one. Long enough that for one foolish second I thought, maybe, Dad. Her voice went flat, cold. I have worked way too hard to get where I am, to start bailing out bad decisions again. You know what it cost me, putting myself through law school after what happened to us? And now you want me to write a check into what, more of the same? Priscilla, this isn't the business. This is my heart. You should have kept better insurance, Dad. You always cut corners. 4-day pause. And then quieter. Meaner. I have a reputation at this firm now. I can't keep explaining you to people. The line went dead. Just like that. My daughter hung up on me while I sat in a hospital parking lot with a blocked artery so she could get back to celebrating with scotch. I called Donna next, told her everything. Asked if she'd talk to Pris, maybe soften her up some. Don't you dare mess this up for her, Donna snapped. She worked hard to get away from all this, from your mess. Marcus has a steady job, doesn't he? Go ask him. She meant Marcus. And after 33 years, she still managed to say his name like it cost her something. I hung up and sat in that truck a long, long time. Didn't cry. I was past crying by then. Just sat there thinking about how a man could work his whole life to give a family everything and end up alone in a Ford Ranger doing math that never once came out right. I met Marcus at a Waffle House, off I-75 2 days later. The kind of place with a waitress who calls everybody baby. I hadn't planned on telling him. I was going to eat my hash browns and let him think everything was fine. He knew before I said a single word. He always did. Dad, he set his fork down. Talk to me right now. So I told him, and I want you to understand, I was ashamed to even be sitting across from my 31-year-old son, a delivery driver who probably didn't have $3,000 to his name total, about to need money his own sister had turned down flat. I didn't even finish getting the words out. Marcus reached into his jacket and set an envelope on the table. Then he turned his phone around so I could see the screen. A confirmation from a title loan company against his truck. Approved. $1,500. Dad, stop talking. His eyes were wet, but his voice wasn't shaking at all. There's 1,300 cash in there too. I sold my tools. The whole set, the snap-on stuff I'd been building since high school. Marcus, my throat closed right up. You sold your tools? Tools can be replaced. Dad. He reached across that table and grabbed my hand hard, the way you grab hold of something you don't intend to let go of. You can't. I'm borrowing Tony's truck for work till I figure something else out. It's fine. I sat in that booth and wept in front of a waitress named Dolores and half the breakfast crowd at a Waffle House off I-75. And my son, the one who didn't have a corner office, the one nobody ever bragged about on the phone, held my hand across a Formica table and told me I was going to be all right. He's the only one who ever really saw me, I thought. The only one who ever really looked. I had no idea, sitting in that booth, just how much that moment was about to matter. I had no idea what was still sitting out there on 11 acres of scrubland past Xenia waiting on me. But that's the next part of this. Stay with me. A letter showed up at my son's duplex while I was still healing from the surgery I could barely afford, and it was worth more than every dollar my daughter ever refused to hand over. I want you to sit with that a second, because I did. I sat with it for 4 days before I told a living soul. But let's not get ahead of things. Let me take you back to the morning of the surgery first, because you need to understand what it cost me to get to that letter. They wheeled me into pre-op at 5:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in early April, and the last thing I remember before the anesthesia took me under was Marcus's face, right up close to mine, his hand squeezing my fingers. You're going to be fine, old man, he said. I already told the nurses you're too stubborn to die on them. They said that's a good sign. Where'd he learn to be this steady? I thought. 31 years old and calmer than I'd been in a decade. Then the lights went out. I woke up 7 hours later with a tube down my throat and an ache in my chest like somebody'd parked a truck on it. Dr. Alvarez came by that evening, still in his scrubs, and leaned down close so I could hear him over the monitor beeping. 2 stents, clean placement, Walter. You did good. I didn't cry. Didn't have the energy left for it. I just lay there thinking about Marcus's tool chest sitting empty in some pawn shop with a different man's name on the receipt now. She bought this, I thought. Not the hospital, not the insurance company. My son bought me this with a title loan and a toolbox he'd spent 15 years filling up. I'm going to make this right, I told myself. However long it takes. I don't care if I'm 90 years old doing it. I had no idea how soon that promise was going to come due. I spent the next 2 weeks recovering on Marcus's pull-out couch, because my own house was empty most days and Donna hadn't so much as texted to ask how the surgery went. I wasn't about to lay up alone in a quiet house listening to my own oxygen machine hum. Marcus's duplex was small, the kind of place where you hear the upstairs neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling. He'd taped his delivery route schedule to the refrigerator with a magnet from a gas station, right next to a photo of the two of us from a Reds game years back. I looked at that schedule every single morning. He's out there right now, I thought, driving a borrowed truck on somebody else's dime because he sold his own tools for me, and Priscilla's ordering room service at some conference in Chicago on a firm card. That thought sat in my chest heavier than the surgical scar. He'd come home most evenings still in his work polo, smelling like cardboard and diesel, check my incision, heat up something simple for the two of us. He wasn't much of a cook, my Marcus. But he tried. He'd sit with me and put on whatever game was on, and never once, not one single time, did he bring up the tools, or the loan, or when I was going to pay him back. That's the difference, I thought. Watching him fall asleep, sitting up in a kitchen chair one night, still in his uniform. Priscilla gives, so she can talk about giving. Marcus gives, because it never once crosses his mind that it's giving at all. To him, it's just what you do for your father. It was a Wednesday, 17 days after the surgery, when the mail carrier knocked instead of just leaving it in the box. Marcus was out on his route. I answered the door in my robe, still moving slow, still tender across the ribs. Got 2 certified letters here, she said. Need a signature on both. One from an outfit I didn't recognize right off, Sycamore Ridge Development Group. And one with a return address I knew instantly, because I'd been getting mail from them for 15 straight years. Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. Here we go, I thought. Another update. Another 6 months of nothing. Another form letter telling me the cleanup was ongoing. Don't touch the property, don't build, don't sell, don't breathe near it. I almost set it on the counter and went back to the couch. Something made me sit down at Marcus's little kitchen table and tear it open right then. I read it twice, then a third time slower, because I didn't trust my own eyes. Remediation status complete. Site released from State Environmental Oversight, effective March 30th, complete. 15 years. 15 years of property taxes on land I couldn't touch. 15 years of my credit sitting in the gutter. 15 years of my own wife looking at me like I was a stain on this family, and it was sitting right there in black and white. Done. Released. Clean. I set that letter down like it might go off if I moved too fast. Then I opened the second one. Sycamore Ridge Development. Turned out that while my acreage had been sitting locked up under a state cleanup order, an old underground storage tank a previous owner had buried decades before I ever bought the land, a highway interchange project I'd bet on 11 years ago had finally broken ground less than a half-mile from my property line. 11 acres of scrubland, with a contamination history nobody wanted to touch, now sitting right at the edge of a new commercial corridor, zoned exactly the way I'd hoped it might be a decade too early. The letter was an offer. A real one, signed, numbers behind it. $11.2 million, cash, 45-day close. I read that number maybe 20 times. I want to tell you I hollered and ran around that little duplex like a crazy man. I didn't. I sat very, very still. $11 million, I thought. And 4 weeks ago I was crying in a Waffle House because I couldn't scrape together 2,800. I looked up and my eyes landed right back on that delivery schedule taped to the fridge. Marcus's handwriting in the margin, Route 14, start 5 a.m., because he'd had to borrow a truck at 31 years old to save his father's life. He's out there right now, I thought, running somebody else's schedule in a borrowed truck, and I'm sitting here holding $11 million. That's the moment something in me went quiet and cold and very, very clear. I didn't call Donna. I didn't call Priscilla. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes later. I never hid this money from anybody out of spite. I just didn't see one single reason to tell people who'd already told me, in their own words, that my problems weren't their problems. Why would I call them, I thought, when 4 weeks ago they'd made it real clear whose problem I was? I picked up the phone and called somebody else instead. Ellis Cartwright's voice came on the line. Ellis, it's Walter. Walter, good Lord, how are you feeling? Marcus told me the surgery went all right. Ellis, I need you to pull some paperwork for me today, if you can. Something in my voice must have told him this wasn't a check-in call. What's going on, Walt? I told him all of it, the EPA release, the Sycamore Ridge offer, the number. Long pause on the line, long enough I thought the call had dropped. 11 million, he finally said. Walt, that changes everything. I know it does. I looked at that route schedule one more time. That's exactly why I need you to pull something else first, before we touch that offer. You remember a document Donna had you draw up, about 6 years back? Ellis went quiet. The postnuptial agreement. The one Priscilla pushed for. That's the one. I remember it well, Walt. I told Donna at the time. I didn't love the idea, but she was insistent, and it was well within her rights given the debt situation you two were carrying. He paused. You want me to pull the original? I want you pulled, and I want you to tell me exactly what it says, word for word. Don't leave anything out. Because if I remember that document right, I thought, Donna didn't just protect herself from my failures. She signed away every claim to whatever came next, good or bad. Ellis called back 3 hours later, and I could hear papers shuffling. Walt, I'm going to read you the operative clause here. Donna Reyes hereby waives, releases, and forever discharges any and all present or future marital claim, interest, or right, legal or equitable, in and to the real property located in Greene County, described herein, including any proceeds, appreciation, or value realized thereupon, regardless of cause. Regardless of cause. Ellis, I said, real slow, does that mean what I think it means? It means exactly what we drew up, Walt. 6 years ago she wanted the house and her retirement accounts protected outright, so you two partitioned the marital estate. She took the house and her savings as her separate property, And in exchange, you took full, sole ownership of that scrubland and every liability tied to it. Notarized, binding, the day you both signed. Whatever happens to that land now, good, bad, or an $11 million buyout, she signed away every legal claim to it years ago. Priscilla was the one who pushed for it, wasn't she? I almost laughed, except nothing about it felt funny. Set the whole meeting up herself. Told her mother it would protect her credit rating if that land ever got seized over your old business debt. Well, Ellis exhaled slow into the phone. Would you look at that? Real smart. Just not in the direction anybody figured. I sat there at Marcus's kitchen table with the afternoon light coming through those cheap apartment blinds, and for the first time in 15 years, I felt something in my chest that wasn't shame and wasn't grief. It was clarity. Ellis, I want to move on. The Sycamore Ridge offer. I don't want a single soul outside this phone call knowing about it until it's done. Not Donna, not Priscilla. Especially not them. I looked over at that gas station magnet holding up the route schedule one more time. Draw up whatever needs drawing up. I want the sale closed, and I want a trust set up right alongside it. Irrevocable, in Marcus's name. Ellis didn't say anything for a second. All of it, Walt? Every dime, after my debts get cleared. My voice didn't shake, and that surprised me more than anything else that whole day. He sold his tools for me, Ellis. Took out a loan against his own truck at some brutal interest rate so I could get on that operating table. He's been borrowing a friend's truck for 3 weeks, so he have some way to work. Meanwhile, my daughter told me to keep better insurance, and my wife told me not to ruin her career. So no, I'm not splitting this down the middle for the sake of looking fair. Fair already happened. Fair happened at a Waffle House off I-75 a month ago, and only one of my kids showed up for it. I hear you, Ellis said. I'll have the paperwork ready by Friday. One more thing, Ellis. Don't put my name on the deed for whatever house I end up buying him either. Trust owns it outright. I don't want one single piece of this anybody can argue about later. Airtight, Ellis said. I understand completely. I hung up the phone and sat there a long while in that quiet duplex, listening to the window unit hum, looking at that little schedule stuck to the fridge. They're going to find out eventually, I thought. And when they do, they're not going to come here asking how I'm feeling. They're going to come asking about money. That's just who they are now, maybe who they'd always been. I wasn't wrong about that. Hold on to that thought. Because it's exactly what happened, but not the way I expected, and not for the reason I expected either. See, I figured Priscilla and Donna would show up once word got out about the land. They didn't know a thing about the land yet when they showed up at Marcus's door 9 days later. They showed up because Priscilla was drowning in something of her own making, and she needed money bad enough that she was willing to walk into the one place she'd sworn she'd never set foot in again, her broke, embarrassing father's temporary bedroom on her brother's pull-out couch. She had no idea what was waiting for her there. Neither did Donna, but I did. I'd had 9 days to get ready for it. If you've stuck with me this far, drop a comment and let me know. Hit that like button while you're at it, and make sure you're subscribed, because this next part is the whole reason we're here. My daughter walked into my son's duplex ready to threaten me with divorce lawyers and a lawsuit. She had no idea I was holding a document that had already frozen her mother out 5 years before either of them ever showed up. 9 days. That's how long I had between hanging up with Ellis and hearing that first hard knock on Marcus's door. 9 days to get my paperwork in order, sign what needed signing, and sit with the strangest feeling I'd had in a decade. Patience. It didn't hurt one bit. I want to tell you I spent that time plotting some big speech. I didn't. Mostly I just healed. Walked a little farther every morning around the parking lot. Sat on Marcus's little concrete step in the evenings and watched the sun go down, thinking about 11 acres of land that had finally, after 15 years, stopped punishing me. Then that Friday evening came, and somebody pounded on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Dad. Dad. Open up. I know you're in there. Priscilla's voice, sharp, frayed at the edges, in a way I'd never once heard from her. Not the smug, satisfied Priscilla from the celebration call. Something else was underneath it now. Marcus got there before I did, still in his work polo. and pulled the door open with a look I recognized. The look he used to give guys at the loading dock who were about to get written up. "You want to explain why you're beating on my door like the police?" he said. Priscilla pushed past him without answering. Donna, right behind her. My daughter, 34 years old, in a wrinkled blazer with her heels in her hand, mascara smudged even though the night was cool. My wife behind her, arms crossed, face set hard. Neither one of them looked at me. Not one word about the surgery. Not one word about the scar, still tender under my shirt. "Dad." Priscilla's voice cracked, just slightly, right in the middle. "We need to talk right now." There it is, I thought. Not "how are you feeling?" Not "I'm sorry I hung up on you in that parking lot." Straight to business, same as always. "Sit down, Priscilla," I said. "You look like you're about to have a heart attack of your own." She didn't sit. She paced. "I was reviewing county records today," she said, her voice shaking. "Sycamore Ridge logged a deed transfer. 11 acres out past Xenia. That's your land, Dad. They flagged the chain of title because of the waiver Mom signed 6 years ago. $11 million cash. You sold it, didn't you?" Donna's mouth actually fell open. 11. Walter. Is that true? So that's how they found out, I thought. Not from me, from a county registry. Almost funny, in a sick sort of way. "It's true," I said, as calm as I could manage. "Closed 12 days ago." 12 days? Priscilla's voice climbed. "You've had this for 12 days and you didn't call me, your own daughter?" I looked at her a long moment before answering. "Last time I called you, Priscilla, you were celebrating a deposition while I sat in a hospital parking lot trying to figure out how I'd pay for surgery. You told me I should have kept better insurance. So no, I didn't feel the need to call you the second something good happened either. That should have softened her. It didn't." "You hid this from us," she snapped, finger jabbing toward me like it made her words truer. "You knew the cleanup was finishing. You knew that land was about to be worth something. You let us think you were broke this whole time. Mom's driving a 9-year-old Camry, Dad, while you were sitting on a fortune, just waiting to hand it to your favorite kid. She actually believes that," I thought, rewriting the whole thing in real time, right in front of me, and believing every word coming out of her own mouth. "Priscilla," my voice came out quieter than hers, which somehow made the whole room go quieter too. "I didn't know that land was worth a dime until 17 days ago. I found out sitting on your brother's pull-out couch, recovering from surgery he paid for. You want to talk about hiding things? I didn't hide a fortune from this family. I hid the fact that I was scared for 15 straight years, because every time I tried to bring it up, your mother told me to fix the bill, and you told me I ruined your college years." Donna stepped in then, chin up, arms still crossed. "Don't you dare stand there and play the victim, Walter. I stood by you for 33 years while you dragged this family through the mud with your business failures. That money belongs to this family. You're being vindictive. You're being cruel. You're being stingy," Priscilla finished for her. "And it's disgusting. Stingy." I almost laughed out loud at that one. A woman who wouldn't hand her father $2,800 for a heart procedure, calling him stingy over 11 million. "We're not asking anymore," Priscilla said. And here's where her voice really changed, dropped low, mean, the voice of somebody who thought she'd already won. "Mom's filing for divorce Monday morning. Irreconcilable differences. Financial abandonment. My partners are already drafting a motion to freeze every account connected to that sale until the court sorts out an equitable division. You hid marital assets, Dad. That's not a gray area. That's fraud." She slammed her hand flat on Marcus's kitchen table, the same table where weeks earlier he'd slid an envelope of cash across without a second thought. "You're going to be tied up in litigation so long you won't have a dollar left by the time we're through. My firm will bury you." I looked at Priscilla, a long moment, then at Donna. Then I stood, slow, careful, still tender across the ribs, and reached into my jacket pocket. "You want to talk about lawyers, Priscilla," I said. "Let's talk about lawyers." I pulled out 2 folded documents and slid the first one across the table to Donna. "You remember this, Donna?" She looked down at it, and I watched the color drain out of her face before she'd even finished the first paragraph. "6 years ago," I said, "you and Priscilla sat me down at my own kitchen table. You were scared. genuinely scared, that the bank was going to come after your accounts because of the business debt. Priscilla's idea, by the way, her brilliant idea. She told you it was smart, told you it would protect your credit if that debt ever caught up with the land. I tapped the paper. So you signed this. Your lawyer drew up a partition agreement. You took the house in your retirement as your sole separate property, and you legally forced me to take 100% of that land and every liability sitting on it as mine. Read it again, I said, as gentle as I could manage, because there wasn't a drop of satisfaction in me watching her hands start to shake. It doesn't say debt. It says, regardless of cause. You didn't just protect yourself from my failures, Donna. Under Ohio law, you converted that land into my separate property. You signed away any future claim to its value, regardless of cause, just to keep your hands clean of my mess. Your own lawyer explained every word of it to you, and Priscilla signed as a witness. Priscilla's face had gone pale too, but she wasn't done. Never was that girl. That doesn't matter, she snapped. I'll still take you to court. On what grounds, Priscilla? I slid the second document across to her. Take a look before you finish that sentence. She looked down. A bank statement. Marcus's bank statement. $61, I said. That's what's sitting in your brother's checking account right now. $61, Priscilla, because a month ago he sold every tool he owned and took out a title loan at 24% interest so I could get on that operating table. While you were ordering champagne to celebrate a deposition, your brother was borrowing a friend's truck so he'd have some way to keep his job. I let that sit in the room a second. You want to talk about court, Priscilla? Go ahead. Bring your partners. Bring every lawyer at that firm. But before you do, go ahead and explain to a judge how you plan to claim a share of assets your own mother legally waived in writing 6 years ago on your advice. Explain to that judge where you were the night your father needed $2,800 for heart surgery and where your brother was. Nobody said a word for a long moment. Just the window unit humming, and somewhere upstairs, a neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling like it had every night for the last 3 weeks. I didn't hide this money from you to be cruel, I said, and my voice finally came down soft, tired, done. I found out about the land's release sitting right here on that pull-out couch, barely 2 weeks after surgery. It took 45 days to close, and the trust was finalized last week. I kept it quiet because I needed time to make sure it went to the one person who'd actually earned it. But I want you both to hear this. Even if I'd known sooner, even if I'd had months of warning, it wouldn't change one single thing about tonight. I looked at Donna first, then Priscilla. You two divorced yourselves from this family a long time ago. You just hadn't gotten around to the paperwork. The trust is already finalized, I said. Irrevocable. The full $11.2 million goes to Marcus. All of it. First thing Ellis did this morning was wire a payoff to that title loan company, burned the note to ash. Next, he cleared the balance on this duplex complex, so Marcus doesn't owe a dime in rent while his new place gets finished. There's a full set of tools waiting on him. Better than the ones he sold, though he's going to fuss at me about that. And I've set aside a fund for the community college scholarship he's talked about starting for kids in the trades who can't afford the tuition. I folded my hands on the table. You're both officially free of my mistakes now. Isn't that what you wanted? For 15 years I heard how I ruined this family with my failures. Well, congratulations. The failure's over, and it turns out you two signed yourselves right out of everything that came after it. Donna's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my wife didn't have a single word left in her. Priscilla just stood there, jaw working, staring at that bank statement like it might rearrange itself into different numbers if she looked hard enough. Get out of my son's home, I said. Quiet, final, both of you. They left in a silence I'd never once heard out of either of them in 33 years of marriage and 34 years of raising that girl. No slammed door, no last word, just two people walking out of a duplex, realizing in real time that the very cleverness Priscilla had always been so proud of, the legal maneuver she'd talked her own mother into, was the exact thing that had locked them both out of a fortune neither one of them would ever see a dime of. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway after they'd gone, arms wrapped around himself, watching me. Dad, his voice was barely a whisper. You didn't have to give me all of it. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked over and put my arm around him, careful of my ribs, and we stood there a minute in that little duplex that wouldn't be his for much longer. Not because he was losing it, but because he was finally getting more than he ever once asked anybody for. Tools can be replaced, I remembered him telling me weeks before, sliding an envelope across a Waffle House table. You can't. He'd been right about that. Turned out I couldn't be replaced either. Not to him. And in the end, that mattered more than any number Sycamore Ridge ever put on a piece of paper. We stood there in that quiet kitchen, my son and me, finally safe, finally free. And somewhere across town, my daughter sat down that night to figure out how she was going to explain to the partners at her own firm that the reputation she'd guarded so carefully wasn't nearly enough to save her now, and there wasn't a single soul left in her corner willing to bail her out either. Funny how that works out. If this one got to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from down in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.